The first Pirates of the Caribbean movie is one of the best action-adventure films made to date, and it was almost completely on accident. With the fifth one coming out, I feel like now is a good time for me to talk about how fucking brilliant it is, and maybe discuss where the sequels went wrong. I don't know, we'll see if I get to that. I'll probably discuss it at some point. When news came out that there was going to be a Pirates of the Caribbean movie, I mean, who the fuck was assuming that would be good? You know what we got the previous year? Fucking Country Bears. Have you seen that movie? It's shit. That set the precedent for what to expect from a film based on a Disney ride.
About a little thing I call hiding in the car wash. So how does that work? We hide in the car wash.
Which is to say, not good. But I actually remember seeing the teaser for the movie as a kid. It was badass. Not Country Bears, Pirates of the Caribbean. You start off you just see a bunch of Caribbean islands, and then you get a goddamn pirate skeleton foot hitting the sand underwater, and that's it. And it piqued the interest of an 11-year-old me. Then the movie came out, and, you know, it was kind of a thing. A big thing. And it wasn't because it had pirates. I mean, pirates weren't cool before this movie. You know what the last movie was that people actually watched that prominently featured pirates at this point? Muppet Treasure Island. And you know what, I love that movie. It's amazing, and you should watch it if you haven't. But it wasn't a movie that could single-handedly make the entire concept of pirates a cool phenomenon. Before that, the only notable big-budget pirate film I can think of was Cutthroat Island, starring Gina Davis, which is, that movie's garbage. It's not good. You may have watched it when you were younger, and you're like, no, that movie's good, but it isn't. You're wrong on that. Watch it again, and try not to be bored. Anyway, nobody watched that movie because it's boring and shit. Before that, I mean, The Goonies had pirates in it, but you know, they're all dead, so I don't think that counts. And also the main pirate is a dick joke.
Red Willie.
Oh man, it's the fearsome pirate Dick McPenis Man person with a Johnson. That's his name. Dick McPenis Man person with a Johnson. Look out for him, he's a scary pirate. So yeah, pirates were not an established cool thing before this movie came out. In fact, since Cutthroat Island, they were basically box office poison. That Cutthroat Island killed pirates for a while. That's how shitty that movie is. I'll stop talking shit about Cutthroat Island now. They're only cool now because this movie made them cool. And you notice that, like, there's been stuff that's tried to capitalize on pirates and it never works. Pirates, for some reason, are hard to actually pull off, apparently. This movie did for pirates what Lord of the Rings did for fantasy films, and I'm gonna tell you how, in detail, because I love this freaking movie, and any aspiring creator of entertainment can and should learn from how good this movie is. Now, that said, the movie doesn't start off on the best foot. It begins with a reference to the shanty song in the original ride, but the song is, you know, sung with no music and it's slightly off key and sung by a little girl. It's all creepy. Now, that sets the tone well and all that, but it's, you know, this whole opening sequence isn't the most compelling thing ever. That said, it gets in and out quick and succinctly and economically sets up the history of multiple characters and it gets it out of the way. And, you know, it deserves some props for just doing it and doing it well enough. Still, not a great opening scene, but you could do a lot worse. From there, however, the movie has a much stronger start. You see the gold piece, the pirate ship, and cut to an older Elizabeth. If the smash cut to her waking up is enough to clue you in to that it's an older Elizabeth, they also show the gold coin again and have her put it on, and this helps the slower members of the audience catch up to everybody else. But this doesn't repeat any information for everyone who already understands that, because seeing her admire and wear the gold informs her character, you know, sets up that maybe she likes adventure a little bit, and it also establishes a major plot point without the audience knowing it. We just very prominently saw her wear the gold around her neck, and given that it was sitting in her drawer, it's easy to infer that this is not something she normally wears. And the only reason she continues wearing it is because her father surprises her, and she rushes to put her robe on, and then immediately is forced to wear a corset that her father bought her as a gift, and it, you know, gets trapped in there. And you're at this point distracted by the fact that this scene not only establishes how suffocating Elizabeth's life is being a woman in the 17th century, but it's, you know, funny and provides characterization as she sardonically comments on the wardrobe.
I'm told it's the latest fashion in London.
Well, women in London must have learnt not to breathe.
You're probably so distracted, in fact, that you probably don't notice that this whole scene explains why the gold is never called out to the crew of the Black Pearl before, as it does later in the movie. Elizabeth usually doesn't take it out of her room and is only wearing it now because of a situation outside of her control. They didn't need to explain that. It's not really a plot hole, but they did anyway, while the scene was also doing other stuff, and you'll see that a lot in this movie. Throughout a large portion of this film, scenes will be doing more than one thing at a time, which is why you'll find yourself engaged pretty much the entire time. While they're giving you exposition, they're also giving you character. When they set up plot points, you don't even notice because they're also simply entertaining you with a fun scene. It's the classic magician's trick of misdirection. Every good magician has mastered the art of hiding things in plain sight by drawing your attention to something else they're doing, and good screenwriters can and should be doing the same thing. If a scene only does one thing in a script, maybe stop and think about whether you could incorporate more into it. Now, this would be something to do after your initial first draft, however. Trying to do this while writing the first draft will probably just hinder your progress and keep you from getting writing done. Just write it all out first and then put scenes together later. That's what a second draft is for. Anyway, yeah. Let's move on. Next, we establish the character of Will Turner with a funny little gag that instantly makes Will likable and relatable. We see the scene play out, and we see a sword that Will is obviously skilled with and knowledgeable about. He proves his knowledge through the dialogue, but demonstrates skill through his actions. Not a single word here is spoken about how skilled he is with a sword, because they're not needed. You also see a more subtle moment of Governor Swan congratulating Will's boss for the work put into the sword, but through simple acting, it's made clear that Will's upset at his master getting credit for what is obviously work that Will not only did himself, but takes great pride in when he shows it off to the governor. We've now learned who young Will has become, what his job is, whether he likes his job, his social status, and one of his personal struggles. And when Elizabeth comes in, we also learn a lot about their relationship in a few seconds. She comes in, is very visibly happy to see him. He keeps their relationship formal due to his social status. The governor acts as the voice of society in praising Will's, quote-unquote, sense of propriety.
Sense of propriety.
And when Elizabeth leaves, upset that he won't return her affection, we see that he also secretly feels the same way when he calls her by her first name under his breath as she leaves. That scene is under a minute, and it establishes their relationship, how each feels, how Will is afraid to act on his feelings, and how society views the prospect of them becoming intimate.
Sense of propriety.
That's a lot done in very little time, so, great job. And then, a little under 10 minutes in, we get the most memorable character of the film, Captain Jack Sparrow. It's no secret that Jack Sparrow, how he appeared in the film, was not how he was written. So much of the character was created by Depp himself that he almost deserves a writing credit for it. From the research I've done, Jack wasn't even a character in the film for a large portion of the process. He was added in after the plot was figured out. He was apparently envisioned by the screenwriters as a straight-up vaudevillian supporting character, just, look at me, I'm gonna go around and I'm gonna bumble and make jokes. And he was envisioned by the producers as a manly, handsome, tough guy, more in the vein of Han Solo. So, they wanted him to be, sexy and stuff. But Depp surprised everybody at the table read by doing a weird Keith Richards impression based on researching pirates and seeing parallels with rock stars, and Gore Verbinski went with it, which brings me to another filmmaking lesson to take from this film. This is one mostly for directors. Don't get married to what's in your head. You're never gonna get exactly what you imagined anyway, and sometimes other people can bring something to a project that you never could have thought of. Entertainment is collaborative by nature, especially filmmaking, and you need to recognize that and allow it to happen. Let actors put themselves into roles. Let people help create your story. If you want an example of a director who just dictated what they wanted to actors and didn't allow for collaboration and creative freedom, that's George Lucas making the Star Wars prequels. You can like them or hate them, whatever, but it's pretty clear that nearly every actor in those films has given a much better performance both before and after them, because George Lucas doesn't know how to direct actors and never has.
I don't like sand. It's coarse and rough and irritating, and it gets everywhere. Here everything is soft and smooth.
Sense of propriety.
Now back to pirates. Jack Sparrow makes this film what it is. His character is all at once goofy, mysterious, likable, scummy, duplicitous, loyal, and dangerous. It's a once-in-a-lifetime performance for Depp. And yeah, I'm including the work done playing the same character on other Pirates films. He was never able to capture the heart of this character again. He became a parody of himself in later films. Jack's introduction is hands down my favorite character introduction in film, period. His dinghy sinks into the ocean as he reaches the docks of Port Royal, and he proudly strides onto the dock as his ship sinks as if it was his plan all along. It's hilarious and basically establishes how Jack will react to any given situation he stumbles into. And it's great hearing a genuinely heroic score backing the comedy here. It's, you know, Hans Zimmer did a great job with the score. I'll probably get into it later. It's important to note that part of the reason this character works is because he's not at the center of this story. The biggest mistake the sequels have pretty much universally made is that they all decide to make Jack the central character, and that is not where he belongs. Jack's strengths lie in being a very memorable supporting character. Will and Elizabeth are the heroes. They were introduced first and made likable first for a reason. The fourth Pirates film suffered from this the most because it introduced their off-brand Will and Elizabeth characters as a side story and put very little effort into making them actually likable or interesting. One's a boring-ass priest who, like, never does anything worth anything, and the other is a mermaid, and the mermaids are portrayed as monsters except for her, I guess? Maybe she's not a monster, but that doesn't make any sense. Why wouldn't she be a monster? Anyway, whenever we cut to the boring priest guy and the weird mermaid girl, everybody's just like, who cares? Let's get back to the actual story, please, with characters we know and like, and instead of the people who are putting us to sleep. Also, as a side note, at the end of the fourth movie, that mermaid totally drowned the priest, right? We never see them again, as far as I remember, so that's what I'm gonna go with, because, you know, she's a monster mermaid lady. The mermaids were monsters, they kill people. Why wouldn't she just want to kill him? And we never see them again. She drowns him. He's dead, which is good, because no one wants to see him again anyway. Anyway, back to the much better movie. So Jack makes port. We see Norrington get promoted to Commodore and propose to Elizabeth, while Jack is having hilarious character-establishing banter while attempting to steal a ship.
It is my intention to commandeer one of these ships, pick up a crew in Tortuga, raid, pillage, plunder, and otherwise pilfer my Weasley black guts out.
I said no lies.
I think he's telling the truth.
If he were telling the truth, he wouldn't have told us.
Unless, of course, he knew you wouldn't believe the truth, even if he told it to you.
Elizabeth, both literally suffocated by her corset and metaphorically suffocated by the expectations thrust upon her by society, passes out and falls into the ocean. Jack shows the audience the first glimpse of him being a good person deep down when he chooses to save her life, and as another bit of likely accidental metaphorical storytelling, Jack saves her life by ripping off her symbol of the pressures of society on her, allowing her to breathe again. I don't think that was an intended metaphor, but it works really well as symbolism if you choose to interpret that way, which, you know, I do, so if you don't like it, fuck you. Now, in saving Elizabeth, it's discovered that Jack is a famous pirate, and we're finally given his name.
Well, well, Jack Sparrow, isn't it?
Captain Jack Sparrow.
And we get this great bit here.
One good deed is not enough to redeem a man of a lifetime of wickedness.
Though it seems enough to condemn him.
Indeed.
Jack takes this opportunity to hold Elizabeth hostage in order to attempt to escape.
You will always remember this as the day that you almost caught Captain Jack Sparrow.
During this attempt, we see Jack enter a blacksmithy where he gets his cuffs off. However, it turns out this is where Will works, and when he returns, he notices something is amiss and finds Jack. Here we get an absolutely amazing action sequence, and by amazing, I don't really mean that the action itself is amazing. It's pretty basic stuff, but the way the action scene is written is, you know, great. We get a bit of foreshadowing of future plot points mixed in with a joke.
You seem somewhat familiar. Have I threatened you before?
We get Will's hatred of pirates established.
I make a point of avoiding familiarity with pirates.
And we get this great little standoff bit before the fight.
Do you think this wise, boy? Crossing blades with a pirate?
You threaten Miss Swan.
Only a little.
The two improvise, not only using multiple swords in the smithy that Will made himself, but also multiple smithing tools as weapons as well. All the while, the fight is treated as a conversation, establishing Will and Jack's characters further. And this is where another filmmaking lesson can be learned. In an action film or show, action scenes are a lot like musical sequences in musicals. That may sound crazy to you, but just hear me out. In a musical, songs and dance numbers are used to establish character and move the story along, not just to be a song in and of itself. At least that's how most musicals are written now. But you know those older films where musical numbers just sort of happen and you get bored because all it does is just show off for a few minutes while the story just stops? That's exactly what you don't want to do with an action scene. The action should move the story forward or be used to teach people about your characters, and if it doesn't, you need to rewrite your action scenes. For both negative and positive examples of this, you can once again turn to the prequels. Yeah, I'm gonna mention the prequels as something kind of positive. You know how the Duel of Fate sequence in episode 1 is kind of the best part of the entire trilogy? A lot of that is because the fight was handled pretty well. It had good beats where things slow down and differences between the characters are established. Remember this bit? This part is a pretty good moment. It establishes major differences between the characters without dialogue. Without dialogue, that is extremely important. Obi-Wan impatiently waits for the force field to get out of his way. Qui-Gon patiently meditates as he waits for his moment, and Maul paces like a predator ready to make a kill. This is the most characterization Obi-Wan gets in the entire fucking movie, and the only characterization Darth Maul gets, period. He's the main villain, and that's all he gets. Part of me is convinced that the choreographers came up with this stuff, because for the rest of the movie, characters are incapable of expressing anything without just saying what they want the audience to know, because George Lucas doesn't know how humans work. On the other hand, there's a fight scene in Revenge of the Sith, where Anakin and Obi-Wan just fight. And they fight. And they continue fighting. And they fight some more. And just to, you know, spice things up, they do a bit more fighting. And nothing about their relationship changes until the final high ground moment. For minutes on end, we watch a fight scene of basically no consequence that wasn't designed with the characters in mind. It was just, all right, things happen. And in the script, it's just they fight. It wasn't written. It was just they fight. And you know how I know that?
Of course, there's a lot of cheating in there. A lot of they fight. For 20 minutes, it just says they fight.
If you're writing they fight in a script, stop and write an actual scene, please. Now, let me show you what I actually mean by that, by analyzing this scene a little bit. It begins with a little impromptu sword fighting lesson that establishes Jack as being a more experienced fighter, and it also shows Jack recognizing Will's skill at sword fighting. But this turns out to be a ploy. Jack used the lesson to maneuver Will out of the way of the door so he could return to his escape plan, because, you know, Jack is tricky. That's his whole thing. Will, recognizing this mistake, does something unexpected in another show of skill as well as cleverness. This is where Jack begins to come across as more threatening, showing a side of him we haven't seen as much so far. This scene establishes that if you get in the way of something he wants, Jack is a dangerous person, which really goes a long way towards the will he, won't he betray them sort of feeling throughout the movie. Then, as they fight, Jack comments on the swords, and Will reveals that he's not only made all of them, but practices with them every day. And this is where Jack spells out Will's conflict, reinforcing it while also turning it into a joke.
You need to find yourself a girl, mate. Or perhaps the reason you practice 3 hours a day is that you already found one and are otherwise incapable of wooing said strumpers. You're not a eunuch, are you?
I practice 3 hours a day so that when I meet a pirate, I can kill it!
And right there, you also saw that it hammers home Will's hatred of pirates. He even goes so far as to refer to a pirate as it, rather than him. We get a balancing act using the environment to have a little fun, and Will once again shows his own cleverness and skill by using Jack's shackles to trap him. Through a bit of silliness, they end up on the rafters, where Jack is actually bested in swordplay by Will, after which Jack decides to throw dirt into his face and pull a pistol on him. And here we see, even though Will's the better swordsman, Jack is a liar, so he wins. This isn't just an action scene. This is storytelling. We know that Will's a better swordsman than Jack now. We know that Jack is able to think his way out of any situation quickly. And throughout the fight, you can see that Will is enjoying himself. Like Elizabeth, he obviously yearns for a life of excitement and adventure, the life of a pirate. And Will learning to think like a pirate is a major arc of his throughout the film. And this right here is what good action does. If you can't think of how to use an action scene as a storytelling tool, you seriously need to rethink what you're doing. With the law closing in, Jack threatens to shoot. Here we get the mysterious line about the shot.
This shot is not meant for you.
And we wonder whether Jack hesitated to shoot Will out of empathy or because he didn't want to waste the bullet, or musket, whatever. And we also get another instance of Will being denied credit for work that he did, it instead being given to his boss, who we now see as a drunk who spends the entire fight and presumably most of the workday asleep. Moving forward now, there's a scene that hammers in Elizabeth's hesitance to marry Norrington, her obvious infatuation with Will, the excitement she felt being held hostage by Jack, and we see the gold coin doing spooky stuff with fire that is directly taken from Raiders of the Lost Ark, but you know, it works, who cares. Then we get a scene with Jack in prison featuring a funny reference to the original ride, humorous back and forth, and some exposition about the Black Pearl, undercut by a joke from Jack, who seems knowledgeable of the ship.
I've heard stories. Never leaves any survivors.
No survivors? Then where do the stories come from, I wonder?
Again, nearly every scene in this movie is doing at least two things at once, if not more. As the Black Pearl attacks Port Royal, we see Will's competence on display, Elizabeth's bravery as she faces the pirates and tells her handmaid to hide.
Hello, Poppy.
We then have the attack called off when Elizabeth shows off her knowledge of pirates by invoking parlay and making a deal, establishing her as a bit of a fangirl of pirates. Next, we get some comedy as well as intrigue, with Jack being the only person in the prison not freed, and him having a conversation with some of who we later learn are his old crew, who give us our first major glimpse at the titular Curse of the Black Pearl.
So there is a curse. That's interesting.
You know nothing of hell.
So Will gets knocked out, Elizabeth goes to the ship thinking she's been kidnapped because she's the governor's daughter, and we get to see Elizabeth show off that she's a smart lady and then get this look from Keira Knightley.
Well, I suppose if it is worthless, then there's no point in me keeping it.
Which is, wow, that's a look she makes because she figures out what they're actually after is the gold coin she's been wearing. When asked her name, she says her name is Elizabeth Turner, which pretty much everyone watching can instantly connect to times in school when they either saw or were the preteen kid pining for the crush and pretending they were married and like drawing in notebooks and stuff. And unbeknownst to her, that last name being attached to somebody holding that gold coin is exactly what they were looking for. And it's possible that's the only reason they don't do really bad stuff to her. But luckily the movie kind of skirts around that. She works out a deal to save Port Royal from being destroyed further, but fails to negotiate for her own release and is kept prisoner as the ship sets sail away from her home.
According to the code of the Order of the Brethren.
First, your return to shore was not part of our negotiations nor our agreement, so I must do nothing. And secondly, you must be a pirate for the pirate's code to apply, and you're not. And thirdly, the code is more what you'd call guidelines than actual rules. Welcome aboard the Black Pearl, Miss Turner.
I will discuss Jeffrey Rush's stellar performance as Barbossa when we get to another scene. Trust me, I'm not overlooking him. So let's blow through all the stuff that I don't want to talk about as much real quick. Will wakes up, finds out that Elizabeth is missing, and when he and Norrington learn Jack Sparrow may know how to find the Black Pearl, Will immediately wants to make a deal while Norrington completely dismisses the idea. Will protests in a very meme-worthy way.
That's not good enough!
But Will is reminded of his status by Norrington, and is chastised because right now he is not showing his
sense of propriety.
Will then decides to break Jack out of prison in order to enlist his help in saving Elizabeth himself. This is something Jack only agrees to after he learns Will's name and makes a not-so-subtle attempt to discover if his suspicions about the name are true.
That would be short for William, I imagine. Good strong name. No doubt name for your father, eh?
Then Will gets a first-hand lesson in how to think like a pirate when Jack forms a plan where they steal a slow Navy ship, wait for the Interceptor, which was already established as one of the fastest ships there are, to catch up to them, and then pull a bait and switch by stealing the Interceptor when the slow ship is boarded. This puts them in the fastest ship in the harbor, already halfway out to sea, and leaving the only ship close enough to them much slower and not in any state to catch up to them. Now, while the plan seems clever, it kind of required the Navy to be dumb enough to have literally the entire crew board another ship without leaving anyone else behind on their ship. But in this movie, the Navy is consistently portrayed as idiots, so whatever. After this, Will interrogates Jack, having picked up on his obvious probing from before. Jack reveals that he knew Will's father, Bill Turner, saying he was a pirate. Will, he doesn't like it. He's so mad that he begins to get violent, but Jack puts him in his place and insists that someone can be both a pirate and a good man. This is another major lesson Will ends up learning by the end of the film. And now it's worth noting that real pirates were not only thieves, but rapists and murderers as well. But the Pirates of the Caribbean films exist in an alternate universe where some pirates were more like Robin Hood-esque hippies or something who are really all about personal freedom and whatnot. There's really nothing wrong with romanticizing the past for the sake of fun, but only so long as we remember that this does not reflect reality. Now, that said, piracy representing freedom at the same time isn't as far-fetched as you may think. A very large percentage of pirates in the 18th century were former slaves. That doesn't erase the heinous crimes pirates committed, but that's an important factor not worth overlooking. And believe it or not, slavery is woven into the lore of the Pirates franchise, and also, believe it or not, this franchise has lore and an extended universe series of novels like Star Wars. Will and Jack's next stop is a place Jack obviously loves called Tortuga, which is basically total anarchy. Now, in reality, from what I can tell, Tortuga at the supposed time the movie takes place was pretty much a normal colony in Haiti at this point, though earlier in history it was a well-known neutral ground for pirates. This place is really in the movie in order to really recreate the sort of setting portrayed in the original Pirates of the Caribbean ride, which at this point you've likely forgotten this was based on because this is just, you know, a good movie. Within the context of the movie, Jack is here to gather up a crew for their expedition to find the Pearl. Their first stop is to find a man named Mr. Gibbs, who people have likely forgotten showed up in the very first scene of the movie as a flask-downing sailor. I'm not sure why he's thrown in the beginning of the movie or why he couldn't have just been a pirate, but it's pretty fun later when Elizabeth recognizes him, so Jack gets Mr. Gibbs to round up a crew as quickly as possible while also hinting that he has plans for Will as leverage, and he thinks Will doesn't hear that, but he does. It's gonna come back to bite him in the ass. We cut back to Elizabeth stuck on the pirate ship during a full moon. She's forced to wear a dress and dine with the captain of the ship, Barbossa. It's here that he tells the story of cursed Aztec gold and that anyone who takes the gold and sells it will be cursed forever. When Barbossa mentions that he's gonna need to spill some of her blood in order to break the curse, she decides she wants to keep her blood inside her body and tries to spill some of his instead. which of course doesn't work because as she soon realizes, the curse he's talking about is real. This is where we get the big special effects sequence, boom, 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 boom. You know, that music. And look, even the monkey is cursed. This is also the part of the movie where we wonder why the pirates didn't look like skeletons under the light of the moon before. And I think the explanation is that they made a point of showing clouds covering the moon before the Black Pearl attacks Port Royal. Now, it still doesn't make much sense because there is a source of light in the sky and it is from the moon. But I guess the implications are that they are only revealed under direct moonlight. But you know what?
That's not good enough!
Because that still doesn't explain how the pirates are obviously feeling pain in the fight. And they can't be feeling pain, so why are they acting like they feel pain? Is it at all an elaborate trick? They don't really need to trick anybody. What does that help them? But I'm frankly willing to overlook it for the sake of this moment here.
For too long I've been parched of thirst and unable to quench it. Too long I've been starving to death and haven't died. I feel nothing. Not the wind on my face, nor the spray of the sea, nor the warmth of a woman's flesh. You best start believing in ghost stories, Miss Turner. You're in one.
And this is a good time to talk about the villains of the movie. They're at once completely irredeemably evil, and yet their plan isn't really to do anything that evil. All they want to do is become human beings again and feel again. It's actually a completely understandable and sympathetic goal. These characters are awful, awful bad people. But the heroes in the film really don't have anything to lose if the villains get their wish. The only reason they're at odds is because of the pirates' methods. If Barbossa would actually just calm down and genuinely try to make a deal with Will, Elizabeth, and Jack, they probably could have just come to a mutually beneficial agreement. I mean, sure, that deal would involve Jack getting the Black Pearl, but Barbossa and his crew could get another ship. Anyway, due to their history and the fact that Barbossa and his crew are murderous assholes, things go a lot worse for them than it had to. It's almost tragic. Almost. And Jeffrey Rush's Barbossa is memorable, utterly villainous, and yet strangely likable. That's why they kept bringing him back. He's just too fun and well performed. Pentella Righetti also do a lot in making the baddies feel a bit more rounded and fun despite their evil. And that's these two here. You probably didn't know their names, but they're named Pentella Righetti. I know that because I really like this movie, if you couldn't tell by how long this video is. And, you know, that's one of the movie's main strengths. Everybody in this film is sympathetic in some way. I mean, does anyone really hate Norrington? You kind of get where he's coming from, right? He actually cares about Elizabeth, and he takes her not wanting to marry him really well. He doesn't even try to hurt Will. He has no plan for revenge. He's just, he lets her go, and that's it. You know, until the sequels, but we're talking about the first movie here. This is a movie filled with characters who all have their own desires and goals, who seem like their own people. Even Anna Maria, played by Zoe Saldana before she got famous.
You stole my boat.
Actually,
she only joins Jack's crew for her own reasons, and it's a goddamn shame that her character never came back in the sequels, but apparently Zoe Saldana didn't really like how massive the shoot was, and apparently nearly quit acting due to it, according to her own words. So maybe not being in the sequels was her own choice. I'm very glad she didn't quit acting, however. She's a very, very talented person. So Jack gathers his ragtag crew, including Anna Maria, after she was promised the Interceptor as repayment for her boat. Later, they're caught in a storm, and we see Jack steering the ship through it using a compass he's had for the whole movie that doesn't point north. However, Gibbs notes when Will questions that they aren't trying to find north. They don't explain the compass in this movie. It's one of those many mysteries in the first films, but in the sequels, we learn that the compass points to whatever the person holding it desires most, which, you know, makes enough sense, seeing as... wait a minute.
A compass that doesn't point north?
I can't see the red hand of the compass in this shot right here, which means it must be pointing forward, right? I mean, is the hand of the magic compass Norrington's holding pointing at Jack? I mean, I'm not saying anything definitive, just saying. We have some pretty compelling evidence here that Norrington might like pirates a bit more than he lets on. Or maybe the writers just hadn't figured out what the compass did until they had to come up with it in the sequels. But you know, hey, if you want to think of it that way, adds a little complexity to Norrington, I say, so. Ship away. Like a pirate ship! So anyway, they get out of the storm, and Gibbs gives Will some of Jack's backstory. Barbossa was his first mate who mutinied him and left him to die marooned on an island. The story gets far-fetched, however, when you hear that Jack claims to have roped together sea turtles to make a raft using the hair from his back as a rope, which, you know, is obviously not true, because have you seen his arms? Like, no way his back is hairy. Jack and Will set off in a rowboat, and Jack tells Gibbs to stick to the code if they don't come back. I'm only mentioning that so that I can discuss it in a bit more detail later. As Will and Jack infiltrate the Isla de Muerta, which we've seen Elizabeth and Barbossa's crew arrive at as well, Jack knows that for someone who hates pirates, Will has been acting pretty, piratical.
Sprung a man from jail, commandeered a ship of the fleet, sail with a buccaneer crew out of Tortuga, and you're completely obsessed with treasure.
That's not true. I am not obsessed with treasure.
Not all treasure is silver and gold, mate.
When they arrive to where the Pearl's crew have gathered, Jack says he has some sort of plan and tells Will to wait, but Will doesn't trust Jack after overhearing the bit about using him as leverage, and knocks him out. Meanwhile, Elizabeth is about to have her blood used for the ceremony to break the curse. They surprise her, however, by cutting her hand instead of killing her.
That's it?
Waste not.
That line has some troubling implications, though. It's unsettling. That's what it is. But the curse isn't lifted, and Barbossa is furious to find out that Elizabeth isn't actually the child of Bill Turner. While Barbossa's crew turn on him and threaten a mutiny, Will sneaks Elizabeth out, leaving Jack to be left behind in accordance to the pirate code and captured by Barbossa's crew.
You're supposed to be dead!
Am I not?
Parlay?
That's the one. Parlay.
Barbossa's first response to seeing him is to have Jack killed, but Jack, as always, thinks his way out of it.
The girl's blood didn't work, did it? Hold your fire.
You know whose blood we need.
I know whose blood you need.
And here, Jack has been given every reason to betray Will, and it looked like he was gonna do it anyways, so why wouldn't he do it now? That kind of stuff where you just simply can't trust that Jack is going to do the best thing for our actual protagonists is one of those things that really make him so memorable in this film. He's crazy like a fox, and you never know what to expect from him in this movie. Back on the Interceptor, Will and Elizabeth have a little heart-to-heart, and Elizabeth reveals that she stole Will's gold coin from him and kept it back when he was discovered in the shipwreck at the beginning of the movie. And she did it because she was afraid that he would get hanged for being a pirate. I mean, Norrington just talked about how he was gonna hang all pirates. So I guess that's a fear that he had very, very recently, like a few minutes ago, instilled in her. So it's at this point that Will chooses to accept that his father was a pirate, though he doesn't seem very happy about it. Meanwhile, Jack is attempting to use his knowledge of Will's identity in order to make a deal with Barbossa, but he's overplaying his hand a bit.
I expect to leave you standing on some beach with absolutely no name at all, watching me sail away on my ship, and then I'll shout the name back to you.
However, this is when the Pearl catches up to the Interceptor. Jack attempts to keep Barbossa from discovering Will, and even all these years later, I'm not sure if it was to protect Will or for his own gain, or, you know, both. But meanwhile, in an attempt to lose the Pearl, Will and Elizabeth both step up and become captains of the ship, basically, coming up with smart plans that would have worked if they weren't up against, you know, a magic pirate ship that can change the direction of the wind and shit. This is again a moment where we get a big fun action sequence filled with excitement, drama, and comedy, but we also get character building for Will and Elizabeth, where we see that the two are not only a great team together, but both are completely in their element acting as pirates. This sequence goes on for 10 minutes, but it doesn't get dull because it's not just 10 minutes of action. We get Jack hatching schemes during the battle, we get that characterization I mentioned, and the audience is experiencing their first and only ship battle in the movie, so the battle is separated into 3 phases. Each of which are brand new experiences for the person watching the film. Things are continuously moving and the circumstances are continually changing. And while the battle has some spectacle, it's not dependent on it to provide all of the entertainment value. And that's the biggest mistake many, and I'd say most, big budget action set pieces make. Relying on spectacle and the quote-unquote cool factor to provide all of the entertainment. You need a little story in there. People like story. People watch movies because they like stories. So make your action scenes stories. I've already said this, but do it. When the battle comes to a close, the Interceptor has sunk and exploded, and it looks like Will has gone down with it. However, he reveals he's alive, and when pressed, chooses to do the unexpected and use himself as leverage this time. Jack, however, was likely hoping to use the information Will just gave Barbossa in order to negotiate for their freedom. Will, threatening to kill himself and lose the pirates their key to breaking the curse, makes his own deal.
Name your terms, Mr. Turner.
Elizabeth goes free!
Yes, we know that one. Anything else?
And the crew! The crew are not to be harmed.
But the pirates interpreted Will's instructions about freeing Elizabeth a bit loosely and choose to maroon her and Jack on the same island they left Jack on years ago.
That's the second time I've had to watch that man sail away with my ship.
And this beat of the movie where the plot slows down is great for a multitude of reasons. First off, the movie needs it. It's been moving very quickly for a long time now, and giving the audience a break before the final burst of action will make the last burst of action that much more satisfying. Secondly, Elizabeth is our other main character, and she's only interacted with Jack once so far. This downtime gives us the opportunity to see her and Jack interact a lot more, so that by the end of the movie, we really believe that both she and Will have a bond with Jack. This is also where Jack's backstory paid off. Not only was the backstory giving us context for Jack's relationship to Barbossa and entertaining us with the far-fetched story of his escape, but also setting up this plot point where we learn that Jack lied about how he escaped. It turned out the island was used by rum runners and he was able to hitch a ride with them back to the rest of the world after staying on the island for only 3 days. Jack uses this previous knowledge to find their old stash of rum, which has been long abandoned since Norrington cracked down on piracy in the area. Elizabeth shows off more of her knowledge of pirates, revealing that she has read all about Jack's infamous adventures when she's urging Jack to help her get off the island and save Will's life. Jack, however, has given up and would rather drink his cares away. Elizabeth plays along. And plays to Jack's lasciviousness and vanity.
It must be really terrible for you to be trapped on this island.
But Elizabeth, as it turns out, has outsmarted the guy who has spent most of the movie outsmarting everybody else around him. While he's blackout drunk, she proceeds to burn all the rum in order to create a giant smoke signal to get the attention of the Navy. Jack, a person who is obviously a high-functioning alcoholic, is incapable of processing this new information.
Yes, the rum is gone.
Why is the rum gone?
He kinda almost gets homicidal. But her plan works, and Norrington arrives to save Elizabeth and arrest Jack once again. Elizabeth tries in vain to get them to go after Will. Jack tries to help by doing what he does best, trying to manipulate them by offering them something they want.
Pearl was listing near to scuppers after the battle. It's very unlikely she'll be able to make good time. Think about it. The Black Pearl. The last real pirate threat in the Caribbean, mate. Can you pass that out?
By remembering that I serve others, Mr. Sparrow, not only myself.
But as you see there, Norrington doesn't budge. The pearl would be a gigantic feather in his cap, figuratively. But Jack's run into likely one of the only people who is moved by duty rather than personal desire. Well, I mean, I guess there's one thing he cares about enough to do it.
Thank you, please do this. For me. As a wedding gift.
Are you accepting the Commodore's proposal?
I am.
A wedding. I love weddings. Drinks all around.
And after that, Norrington agrees, having Jack point them to Isla de Muerta. Back at the Pearl, Will learns what happened to his father, the man they called Bootstrap Bill. It turns out Bill was against what happened to Jack, you know, the whole mutiny thing. And the crew of the Pearl sunk him into the depths of the ocean. It was only after the fact that they learned that they needed to get his blood in order to break their curse. And when I was younger and before the sequels came out, this detail kind of bugged me. At the time, I assumed it to mean that for a decade, Bootstrap had just been suffering under the depths of the ocean, and when the curse finally broke at the end of the movie, Will had effectively killed his father. In the sequels, we of course learned that Bill found another way out of the curse. But at the time, that was pretty messed up to think about, you know, being like 11 or whatever, guy just constantly drowning underwater. After they get that story, they learn they've arrived at Isla de Muerta! Once again, Jack's crew stays behind in the brig. Meanwhile, Norrington is caught up and scopes out the pirates from longboats, where Jack comes up with a plan to go in and lure out the pirates so the Navy can blast them with their cannons. And, by the way, is it just me, or do both of the actors nearly break in this scene?
What do you have to lose?
Nothing I'd lament being rid of.
Now, to be quite honest with you,
I don't know what's so funny to them, but... Or, you know, maybe it's a sign of Norrington's hidden feelings.
Nothing I'd lament being rid of.
Norrington is such a tsundere, but everyone knows Barbossa is best girl. Elizabeth, learning of the plan, tries to warn the Navy that the pirates are cursed and, you know, can't die from cannons. But they don't believe her and lock her in a cabin. Meanwhile, the pirates have decided that they don't want to risk any more mistakes, so this time they intend to slit Will's throat in case they need more blood from him or something. That doesn't make sense, but pirates aren't known for being smart, you know, in general. Jack, however, shocks Barbossa by showing up again to interrupt their ritual after his second marooning. He stops Barbossa from killing Will, warning him that a Navy ship is out there waiting offshore and will kill them if they break the curse before dealing with them. Meanwhile, Norrington isn't an idiot, so he's not waiting on the ship to shoot cannons at the pirates because he doesn't think it's a good idea to do exactly what Jack Sparrow suggests. He knows his man so well. Jack hatches a plan with Barbossa to kill the Navy while they're still undead, take their ship, and Jack offers to captain the Pearl under the flag of Barbossa. Though the argument that really seems to sway Barbossa is the part where Jack offers him a big hat.
I'll buy you the hat. A really big one.
Oh, and I love this moment where he warns Will to prepare for the fight and tells him his plan. While Jack basically has Barbossa and the pirates taken in by his charm, he uses the Aztec gold to make his point visually. Remember when I brought up the magician's trick and misdirection stuff back at the beginning of this long-ass video?
Wait to lift the curse until the opportune moment. For instance, after you've killed Norrington's men, every last one.
I love that Jack, in plain sight, tells Will his plan. Meanwhile, he distracts the pirates from his theft of one of the pieces by using them as a visual aid and palming one of the pieces. And it's worth noting that Will understands what's going on right now. He's made a full transformation to thinking like a pirate, and more specifically, thinking like Jack. Now, I think Jack still intended for the pirates to get blown out of the water because he calls for them to get on the boats. All he needs to do is clear the room of most of the pirates so he and Will can take on Barbossa. He's surprised to learn that Barbossa has another plan for attack, however. And here's the underwater skeleton pirate stuff I saw in the teaser as a kid. Funnily enough, this was foreshadowed by Will and Jack's trick used to take the interceptor at the beginning of the movie. It's just, you know, parallels. Also, look how they use the ship and the shadow of the ship in order to organically widen the aspect ratio of this shot to make it feel more epic. That's smart cinematography things. As the pirates sneak onto the ship, Elizabeth's father comes to the door of the cabin to talk to her. He seems to genuinely care for her happiness, as he worries that her agreeing to marry Norrington just to save Will is the wrong decision for her. While Governor Swan wants Elizabeth to like and marry Norrington, it's sort of established here that he won't force her to do anything that makes her unhappy. He discovers, when she doesn't answer him, that she's escaped the cabin and is heading to the Black Pearl in a rowboat, and that's when the pirates attack. It's pretty brutal, too. It's bloodless, but nevertheless, it feels violent and ruthless as they murder Navy soldiers. Governor Swan hides in the cabin, because he doesn't fight people. And when we come back to Jack, Will, and Barbossa, we get a quick establishing shot of the room they'll soon be fighting in and get a feel for the geography beforehand, and establish the shafts of moonlight pouring in at specific points. Moonlight is highly exaggerated in this film for, you know, obvious reasons, often acting more like blue sunlight, but, you know, it never feels off. Oh, and I love this little monologue here.
Me, I'm dishonest. And a dishonest man you can always trust to be dishonest. Honestly, it's the honest ones you want to watch out for, because you can never predict when they're going to do something incredibly stupid.
And then the fight begins, accompanied by the iconic Pirates of the Caribbean theme by Hans Zimmer. Jack, of course, goes straight for Barbossa. Even though Will and Elizabeth are the stars of the film, Barbossa is Jack's enemy. As Will takes on the other three pirates, outnumbered, we see one of them go into the shaft of light, revealing the gimmick of this final fight scene. And I'm not using gimmick as a pejorative here. A good gimmick can make an action scene go from good to great, especially when you make good use of it, which, as you'll soon see, they do. Elizabeth sneaks onto the Black Pearl and gets some nice humanizing stuff with two of the crew members, deciding on what food they want to eat once they're no longer cursed. This also explains why they're too distracted to notice her. The skeleton monkey jumps out at her, similar to earlier in the film when it scared her and she screamed, but she's a different person now, and this serves as a moment to show that.
Oh, shit.
More parallels. I always feel bad for the monkey, though. I mean, it's a monkey. It's like, he's just doing monkey stuff. Why you gotta hurt him? She uses that as a distraction and then breaks the crew out of the brig. Back at the HMS Dauntless, the Navy is obviously unable to handle fighting undead pirates because, you know, they are not undead. They're pretty much all slaughtered by the time one of the men manages to ring the bell and call Norrington and his men back to the ship to keep it from being taken. Meanwhile, Governor Swan is providing some levity by being extremely attached to his wig that is currently being taken from him by, you know, a skeleton hand, but he really wants that wig. He will not let go. But, and this shouldn't surprise you at this point, this scene is also doing multiple things at once. I mean, it's funny, but also when he attempts to knock the hand away, it also shows us that pirates don't just look like skeletons in the moonlight. They actually become skeletons. He knocks the arm off because it's a skeleton arm. This was also established a little bit before, but this is a good and more solid reminder since it factors into the fight back on the island. Speaking of, at this moment, Barbossa stabs Jack. Many members of the audience, caught up in the excitement here, have probably forgotten that Jack stole the coin, or possibly even didn't make the connection that that would curse him as well. But as he sets back into the moonlight, we see that he's intentionally cursed himself so that he wouldn't die fighting Barbossa. Will, however, is not immortal, so that makes the stakes remain high for the fight. Also, nitpick here. This one pirate stabs another pirate and he screams like he's hurt again. I mean, I love this movie, obviously, but no movie's perfect. They shouldn't...
I feel nothing.
They keep acting like they're hurt, but they're not. Elizabeth and the crew take down the pirates on the Black Pearl, but when Elizabeth wants to go save Will and Jack, they remind her of the code. you know, the whole they get left behind thing. Elizabeth, at this point, chooses to cite Barbossa, of all people.
You're pirates. Hang the code and hang the rules. They're more like guidelines anyway.
But they leave anyway, subverting audience expectations and forcing Elizabeth to go help Will and Jack on her own.
They're stealing our ship!
Bloody pirates!
And I just want to point out this fun thing Hans Zimmer did in the score. While we focus on the Navy, we get this heroic theme that seems appropriate for them. But when they clash with the pirates, their theme and then the pirate theme also clash together. It's just a fun little thing I wanted to point out. I don't really have a whole lot to say about Hans Zimmer's score for this film, except that it's, you know, it's really good in defying the pirate sound in film. Back on the island, Will fights that guy he non-figuratively buried the hatchet into when the Pearl attacked Port Royal. Like before, he's now throwing bombs at Will. He's like a mini-boss for Will to fight while Jack takes on Barbossa. And look, again, I love this movie, but it has a few flaws.
I'm gonna teach you the meaning of pain!
You like pain? Try wearing a corset.
That line is one of them. We didn't need the action hero line, and it really doesn't work. But it's gone quickly, so it's easy to overlook.
Which side is Jack on?
At the moment.
That's a good line, however. And now, instead of Will fighting 3 pirates alone, he fights alongside Elizabeth, and they once again prove that together they're capable of great things. This is an awesome way to non-verbally show their chemistry and what good partners they would make. And they never feel the need to spell this out in dialogue because the audience feels it. It's really good. It makes you root for them to get together. And here we get the payoff of the gimmick of them going in and out of moonlight. And that "not fair" line draws parallels to Will after Jack defeated him at the duel in the beginning.
You cheated. Pirate.
Will fights like a pirate now. He's not worried about the rules of combat and stuff, he just wants to win. Will runs to the chest of gold and Jack notices, cutting his hand and throwing the coin at him. Barbossa notices that and pulls out a gun to threaten Elizabeth. Jack responds by using that one shot he mentioned in the fight with Will that Barbossa had left him when he marooned him, shooting Barbossa.
10 years you carry that pistol, and now you waste your shot.
He didn't waste it.
I feel cold.
That last moment for Barbossa is fucking phenomenal. In his last moments, they chose to make him sympathetic, while also showing the irony of Barbossa getting what he wanted in the end. Just, you know, he probably assumed he would die later. With the curse lifted and the Navy outnumbering them, the pirates give up, now fearing for their lives.
Parlay.
Rule of threes, guys. Rule of threes. It's the rule of threes! Now, everything's done. The day is saved. Will looks at Elizabeth, and you may be expecting the part where the heroes finally kiss, but Will learned from Jack that Elizabeth had agreed to marry Norrington, and even after all this, he still just won't openly share his feelings with her.
Your fiancé will be wanting to know you're safe.
And on top of that, Jack was abandoned by his crew. They returned to the Dauntless, Jack coming to terms with, you know, what comes next. And what comes next, presumably a few months later, is Jack's hanging. Elizabeth notes how wrong it feels, and her father doesn't deny it. He just says Norrington is bound by the law to do it. And you know what? Norrington doesn't look too thrilled to be executing his hubby either. Will, now dressed like a musketeer or something, catches sight of a parrot of one of the members of Jack's crew, and this spurs him on to do something he knows he has to do.
Elizabeth, I should have told you every day from the moment I met you. I love you.
Yeah, that. Also, and he helps Jack escape using the exact trick he had used earlier to stop Jack from escaping before. This film is just parallels everywhere. Everything's a parallel to something. Elizabeth helps by pretending she has passed out like she did at the beginning of the movie and distracting Norrington so Will can pull it off. Look at that, it's another parallel. Just parallels galore. Oodles of parallels. Will and Jack fight off the executioner and then fight in perfect synchronicity as they attempt to take on the Navy soldiers, but there's too many. However, we see the culmination of Will's arc in this moment.
He's a pirate and a good man.
Will is reminded of his social status once again.
You forget your place, Turner.
It's right here. between you and Jack.
But he doesn't care what society thinks anymore.
As is mine.
Elizabeth's intervention forces the Navy to stand down. Norrington's pretty broken up about Elizabeth revealing that she really wants Will. You know, like, the dude sounds like he's gonna cry.
So this is where your heart truly lies, then?
But Elizabeth has learned how to use her place in society to her advantage, and uses what power that she does wield to save Jack and Will's lives. Jack, meanwhile, does some showboating and nearly goes in for a kiss a couple times here.
I want you to know that I was rooting for you.
It's a thing, guys. And then he accidentally falls off the same spot where Elizabeth fell at the beginning of the movie, because more parallels. And because we already saw her survive the fall, it already makes sense to the audience that Jack would as well. And at the bottom, he finds the Black Pearl. His crew came to help him after all.
Thought you were supposed to keep to the code.
We figured they were more actual guidelines.
And yeah, the movie ends with the characters embracing the philosophy of the villain, and the characters' arcs are to learn that it's cool to lie and cheat in order to win. I mean, I don't know what to do with that moral, but it's not one you typically hear, so I'll take it for the sake of variety. And look, Will is actually given credit for the work he did on Norrington's sword.
This is a beautiful sword. I would expect the man who made it to show the same care and devotion in every aspect of his life.
Thank you.
Norrington recognizes him as his own person with value. Everything is tied up with a nice bow. And hey, Norrington even got an arc in this movie.
What about Sparrow?
Well, I think we can afford to give him 1 day's head start.
And Governor Swan respects Elizabeth's decisions for herself, and even looks happy at the end for her.
Here's a blacksmith.
No. He's a pirate.
Oh, he is? Well, in that case, I suppose we have to hang him now. So sorry.
Drink up, me hearty yo-ho.
Being a pirate is horrid with me. Do what you want, 'cause a pirate is free. You are a pirate.
And yeah, that was me talking for way too long about Pirates of the Caribbean, The Curse of the Black Pearl. And, if you can't tell by now, I really like it. These people were given the task of making a movie based off of a ride in Disneyland, and they went ahead and decided to make the best movie they possibly could and ended up making a modern classic. And they made something that was so much more popular than the ride itself that the ride now has been changed to be more like the movies. We are getting the 5th movie in the franchise 15 years later. And it's only because these movies keep making money based off of the strength of this first movie. People love this movie so much that they will sit through Pirates of the Caribbean 4 and then still think, you know what, I'll give the next one a chance because it might be even a fraction as good as this movie. And you know what, I'm one of those people too. I hope the 5th one's good because who wouldn't want to see another movie as good as this one? And I mostly made this video for myself, but if you got something out of it, great. And if you want to see more videos like this, probably not as long as this, but like this, feel free to give to my Patreon. I'm gonna start letting people vote now on what videos I make next. I'm gonna choose the topics and stuff, but I'll let people decide which of those topics I tackle first, basically. Until then, see you next time.